You still hear me?
Two and one. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another session with Westford University College. Fun is a wonderful webinar, another great series that we have in line for all of you. Thank you, everybody, for joining in, and I hope you all have been well. We haven't had a webinar in a very long time, but I'm sure this one is going to be a very nice one, worth the wait. We have with us today in our Connect session, Mr. Andrew Stotter Brooks. And while everybody has been locked down at home during this pandemic, and considering that the COVID-19 hasn't really been very blessing as a thing on us, we have Andrew who's going to speak to us today about how HR and his experience with over 30 years in his expertise, now that he is with Etihad, how HR sees a future for itself. And during the COVID and during the pandemic, what's the entire look ahead for the airline industry. And my name is Ashima. I'm welcoming everyone once again to another We Connect session. We have with us Mr. Andrew Stotter Brooks, everybody. Please welcome him. And good to see you. Good to have you here, Mr. Andrew. All over to you. Let's hear it from you.
It's lovely to be here. So I think the most important thing, as with anything that we do at all, is really just encouraging you to ask questions. So obviously there's some really good functionality around the chat here today. So thank you very much, and Fatima, thank you very much. It's lovely to see you on the call with us, Fatima, today. I suppose it might be useful just to start with a little bit of background, really. So it's almost impossible to believe this, but I've been working in kind of HR. For more than 35 years now, in various roles really, and I've worked actually pretty much on every continent. I've worked exclusively across Russia, Australia, all over the UK, all over Europe. Obviously extensively last 15 years working in the Middle East really, so all the Middle East and all the beautiful Middle Eastern countries, all over the US, Canada. I haven't done too much work in South America, but there's plenty of time yet. But what we want to try and do today is just really take you through some kind of like thoughts on what HR is and really how we're kind of like really grasping the current situation. We were chatting just before we went live really, just around none of us could have really predicted what we were planning to do in 2020. We never knew what was going to happen, and obviously it has had a huge impact on the airline industry. I suppose from an HR perspective, and definitely from my perspective, we were always in a very good position when we kind of came into it, because we always wanted to move towards much more remote learning and to really help our learners kind of develop and grow, really. Ashma, are there any questions you'd like to ask me as we kind of get started here? There's no questions at all. Okay, so let's talk about what we've been doing. So most of you may or may not be aware that I've been working in the sort of performance management space. Really, I've done a lot of work in that area, and I've worked with some really big organisations, including Barclays and Hilton International. We've done a lot of work with obviously P&O, ran a lot of Starbucks, so more than 5,000 Starbucks stores. Some very, very big retail brands, including H&M, IKEA, some sort of big restaurant brands, so people like Pizza Hut, Burger King, those guys. I have to say my children weren't that impressed when I was working for Burger King, although I have to say I absolutely loved working for Burger King. It was absolutely brilliant organisation to work with. But obviously, as mentioned, now I'm finding myself in aviation for the first time. It's quite an interesting place to be, I suppose, because normally with someone like myself, the way that I go about doing things, I'm perhaps not so familiar with the industry, but what I am very familiar with is the process. So within our organisation, we've been really working hard on trying to solve a few sort of like people challenges for the organisation. And what our people have been telling us, perhaps unsurprisingly, when they're learning, when they're growing, when they're developing, there's probably 3 or 4 things that they like to really kind of get their teeth into. And I suppose the first and the biggest one, probably the most important one for me, is this piece around being coached and being mentored. I think as we go into 2021, definitely my organisation, definitely Etihad Aviation Group, is going to be focusing very much on how we develop those skills, that kind of coaching and mentoring, primarily because that's what employees want from us. And I think it's the new generation of employees. As I said, I'm turning into quite an old man now, and definitely in my time of working in the space, there's been some quite big changes, but I don't think I can remember in my sort of 35 years of working in this area such significant changes and massive changes. So what the next generation are really telling us is that they want to learn through mentored and coached. I mentor and coach many people across the organisation and outside of the organisation. Well, personally feel it's very fulfilling doing that. But I think the important thing about coaching and mentoring is that it's really about empowering our team members and giving them the opportunity to kind of grow with the organisation. The second thing they ask us repeatedly is this piece really around learning through kind of what I term as sort of project-based learning. So they prefer to learn through projects as opposed to actually learning through just theory. I've worked in the Middle East for 15 years now, and there's some kind of key differences, I suppose, working in the Middle East as opposed to working in Europe and definitely the US. And I suppose the biggest one is that piece around how much people know about their jobs and how much people actually apply that knowledge. I think there's always been a huge gap between.
Correct. Yes.
We talk a lot about. I mean, the more you listen to me speaking, I talk a lot about recipes, and I was kind of planning to share perhaps a couple of recipes with you today. Recipes are useful because if you're going to use a recipe, if you want to make a cake or a curry or a pie or even a drink, it's useful to follow a recipe because usually, if you're inexperienced and you follow a recipe, the end result is normally very good, particularly if you stick to it roughly, stick to it pretty well. And then, of course, as you bring your own experience to the recipe, then you might want to change the recipe slightly, and that'll kind of progress you. But we normally talk about that kind of 80-20 in recipes. So we always focus on giving people good recipe. But so the first thing is really that our employees definitely prefer to be coached and mentored in their jobs as opposed to just thrown in there and told, and they're not that keen on direction. I'm just being told what to do because they want to think for themselves. I suppose increasingly everyone is different, and I think people like to be treated as being different as well now, as from an employee point of view. So it's important that we're doing that. So definitely coaching and mentoring. That piece around project management is really important. So actually getting involved in actually running projects, actually getting experience through work, because I think many of us learn from that. What we've then started exploring is, rather bizarrely, I touched on it a couple of minutes ago, but we were talking about this piece around following recipes. I have a 23-year-old daughter, a 22-year-old son. My daughter actually is a lawyer. She works in the UAE. She's a phenomenal cook. She loves cooking, and she's very has a very wide range of kind of recipes that she draws on. But actually, the reason I bring George into the conversation is not so much about her ability to cook, which is great, but it's the way that she goes about learning how to cook, which I think is really important for us. And so we've learned very quickly that actually this generation, Generation Z or Z, is very much into kind of way they learn by watching, and they want to learn by things like YouTube. So we basically now, if Georgia is looking to make a chocolate brownie or a Thai green curry, her preferred mechanism is really to go and actually watch. Well, she'll find a recipe for it. Then she'll basically watch a world-class chef producing that, usually with her iPad in the kitchen. And the reason she does that is she's able to pause the learning. We've kind of taken that to the next level, really. So a lot of the work I'm doing, and I'm doing a lot of work with SAP and with SuccessFactors, and more recently, with the House of Lords and with the House of Commons in the UK, and sort of Ministers of Education, and quite a few schools in the UK. We've been doing a lot of work really around helping them understand that concept. So if you think about that watching the chef making chocolate brownie, the beauty is that he or she can pause it. Most of those videos are probably going to be in the region of about 3 or 4 minutes, the reason that those videos are short is mostly because they want likes and they want watches, and we know that if people watch those videos, then there's more learning. Yeah. So what we then kind of we originally set up an idea that we would create lots of micro learning within the organisation. We have lots of different mechanisms for doing it, and genuinely, if you wanted to watch or see some of those videos, just ping me, an email, send me a message in WhatsApp, send me a message in LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share some content with you.
Yes.
We
But you know, I'm just mentioning something there. You mentioned it's really interesting. I really love these keywords of recipe and instant, fast learning, because I wanted to watch something. You mentioned about the Gen Z as well. But businesses today are looking for something very agile, instant, fast, and rapid. How far do you think is it going to be a good thing for us to stick to these recipes?
I think the thing is, it's the speed that we can actually produce content now, because we are. Gosh, I have an audience of more than 8,500 people who get a daily WhatsApp message from me. So we have huge WhatsApp groups, and we make videos every single day. So sending messages out to them. Actually, what we found is that we referenced this idea that it would be about, we would try and make videos 4 minutes long. What we actually found very quickly was that most of our videos are much more impactful if they're kind of like 60 seconds or 90 seconds. So we don't really spend a lot of time making very, very long videos, and everything we do is produced with this kind of technology. We have our mobile phone. They have cameras. I was doing some workshops on Thursday. We were talking about influencing and communicating. We were talking with senior leaders, and actually getting them to, if they're briefing their teams, just having the technology, using the technology, and actually videoing themselves with a message is much more impactful. WhatsApp is definitely in my organisation. WhatsApp is a huge. It's probably the preferred mechanism, if I'm honest. People use WhatsApp a lot, but it's ever so easy because you can video yourself with a message. You can push it out to, in my case, 8,500 people in the morning, and they get that message straight away. It's amazing how that impacts team members. And of course, if they can watch it 1,000 times, God bless them if they do. But if they wanted to go and revisit that content or that idea, it's useful. We've also created this very nice structure. So it's interesting what you said, because I'm a huge fan of what I call MVP, which is minimal
viable findings. Interesting. You're actually picking up words that are very intriguing, because these are the words that we teach and we discuss with case studies. So go ahead with the minimal viable findings.
Yeah. What we tend to do is I suppose like any good organisation, I think we are. When we launched our new framework to the organisation, we have a thing called the 8 knowledge areas. We launched that 16 months ago now. So the framework itself is built in Korn Ferry. So there's Korn Ferry have a competency framework which they have developed, and we've taken parts of that competency framework to help us with our the way that we measure employees and the way that we help employees learn. But we brought it into the business probably in about 3 months. And even when I talk to SAP and SuccessFactors, they're going, "Crikey, how did you write your competency framework, and how did you set that competency framework up, and you set that curriculum up in about 12 weeks?" And I said, well, the reality is that it's in my mind, it was always what was the minimal viable product. It was what was the least we could get away with. And then once we allowed our audiences to review that, and we kind of published it very quickly on our intranet, in our case HR Gateway, people then obviously were able to kind of get visibility of it. Actually, as it transpires, I think we were probably about 95% right first time. We could have spent 2 years developing the framework and another year kind of communicating and testing it, but we didn't. We took 12 weeks.
You can't. I don't even think that's going to be viable to do all that work and then get it out in the market, because once something is in the market, your consumers, your customers will move forward. That's how everything.
They have, and that's the thing. And it was interesting because if you imagine that the way I often explain it is, if you think about building a railway track. I don't know, across India or across the United States.
Mhm.
They didn't build the entire track right the way across India and then open the track. What they did, they built sections of the track, and
Correct.
open those sections of the track up, and then built another section of the track and open that
Yes.
section of the track up. And that's really the methodology that I use. Yeah, so we,
It is simultaneous. So everything
yeah,
instead of having, how it works in a Gantt chart. You have activity one completes then the activity two and then the activity three. So it's basically getting all of it together and then running it sequentially but simultaneously. Yes.
and that's exactly how it works. So we then, not only, so we launched, we had a very clear idea about, I mean, I suppose I'm quite strategic. We had a very clear idea about what we were going to be doing for the organisation. We have a very, very strong 5-year plan. We're 2 years into that plan. Well, 18 months, 19 months into that 2-year plan. It's that 5-year plan, sorry. But realistically, that's constantly under review. And it's constantly being, we don't, and I'm very, very quick to tell anyone who challenges me within the organisation, this is not written in stone. We haven't kind of carved out in granite.
It wouldn't work
Forever.
anyways. Yes, you've got
It
to be
doesn't work.
agile. You have to be on your toes. And I would like to connect it back to the fact when you mentioned coaching, because this
Yeah,
is something which is very different from teaching, lecturing, supervising, or guiding. Coaching has this. I always understand, because an HR person would, why do you always have a coach with you? The coach is always doing the things, and then you're watching, and then you're learning, and then you're getting your own expertise. And when you're
yeah.
mentioning about things becoming faster and rapid, can you give away perhaps 2 or 3 tips for leaders today? How can they really coach, or what should they coach their team like so that they can suit the contemporary business landscape, or take the COVID-19 situation?
Yeah, no, I think coaching is probably the most. I mean, I'm not allowed to have a favourite child. We have our sort of 8 children of the 8 knowledge areas, and I suppose coaching would probably be that favourite child. So we have a major sort of focus on that. I mean, coaching for me, I've been coaching professionally for more than 30 years now, and I suppose I was with a load of on Thursday, and we were talking with and these are the guys who they basically repair aeroplanes. I mean, so they're quite serious jobs, and some of them really struggle with the idea of coaching, and I say to them, if you're trying to fix an engine on an
Mhm.
aeroplane, yeah, do you just have one tool? And they look at you and go, of course we don't have one tool. We have hundreds of tools, Andrew. It's like
Yes,
going, yes, precisely. And actually, coaching is like that. As a leader, I think
correct.
people get hung up on the idea that they have to be a certain way as a leader. But in reality, we have multiple tools in our
Multiple
toolbox.
tools.
And we need
Yes,
to be able to, and I think one of the biggest challenges is really understanding when to use a particular tool
that is so
for an
well said.
employee.
So
Do
well
we
said.
actually, so I've always, for 30 years, I've always kind of said it's my 3 4s really. So I always go, there's the first 4, the second 4, and then the final 4. If we work our way through that just very, very quickly, and again, really comfortable if anyone wants to ask me any questions around this on the call now or afterwards. But I think the most difficult part of coaching really is deciding when to coach. So
Correct.
there's going to be 4 questions that I would ask myself in an instant, before I decide to go down the coaching road with an employee. So the first question I ask myself instantly, because normally coaching starts when an employee comes to you and they've got
Yes.
a problem, or they've got a question. I've got a problem with either this employee or this situation or this project. Can you please help me fix that problem?
Correct.
So as that problem starts, as that conversation starts, instantly I ask myself 4 questions. The first
Okay.
question I ask myself is, have I got time to coach at this point? Yeah,
Mhm.
because I might just be going into a webinar. I might just be going into a big meeting with my boss. I might be going into there's 101 things I could be doing. So actually, it would be difficult for me to coach if I was about to go and do that, because I wouldn't be able to give it my full attention. So the first
Right.
question is, have I got time? The second question I ask myself is, does that person have time? Because sometimes they need an answer and they need it instantly. Yeah, they haven't got time to be coached through it. They haven't got time for me to ask them questions and for
Correct.
them to get to a conclusion. So there's the first question: have I got time to coach? The second question is: have they got time to coach, or have they got time for me to coach them? The third question is: really what's I always think it's almost like the self-fulfilling answer, really, because they probably wouldn't come to me unless I had a relationship with them.
True.
Because
Yes.
you're unlikely to go up to a stranger and say, can you solve this problem for me? But
Yes.
but realistically, coaching is all about having those relationships and having a relationship. So the third question is, does that person have a relationship with me? Do we know each other well enough to have that conversation? And the final one is, where are we having this conversation? So because it might happen at my desk, in my office, it might happen in the coffee shop, and I need to be thinking, who's actually listening to this conversation? Because when I'm having a coaching conversation, I don't really want an audience to it. All I really want to have is the coachee and me having a conversation, because actually if there's people listening, it really closes it down. So the 4 questions I need to ask myself before I go down the coaching route and use that particular tool is, what's going on for me? What's going on for them? What's going on between us, and what's going on around us? Yeah. So if I can answer positively to those 4 questions, then I can move into the next kind of phase, really. So the second 4, very simple, really. And these are skills that you can practice every single day. First of all, it's the ability to build rapport. When we communicate, primarily we're communicating with our bodies. I have a huge thing about turning cameras on. So I don't, obviously we've moved virtually. I really want to try and encourage people to use their cameras, because the harsh reality here is that when we're communicating, 90% of our communication, there's lots of different studies around this, but 90% of our communication is actually done with my body. Yeah, as about 7% of my communication is done with my tonality. That's the way I say something. And about 3% of my conversation is the words I'm using. So how good am I building rapport with the person I'm speaking to? That's a really critical skill.
Very important.
As a coach, how good am I at listening? We have 2 of these, and we have 1 of these. So actually, are we able to basically listen to what's happening and not just using our ears?
Yes.
Because remember, if we're communicating primarily with our bodies, this is where we hear the message primarily with our eyes. Yeah?
Correct.
So watching body language and watching the way that people react to conversations and situations is really important. And it's just practice, guys. The third thing, I suppose, is really what we call about, it's a simple one, really, but being empathic. So I always find it much easier if you put yourself in the shoes of the other person. Because if you put yourself in their position, it gives you, I think, a much greater insight into kind of where they're coming from. And then, of course, critically, and probably the most important of that second 4, is really having a good command of being able to ask questions.
True.
The asking questions is a real art, and the way that we ask questions and the way that is really important. I see such bad question asking, so many closed questions, so many multiple questions, so many leading questions, a lot of ambiguity. So we've really got to work on our coaching. And for me, if you want to know the best coaching questions at the beginning of a coaching conversation, really, what's on your mind? To be honest with you, if you wanted me to give you one great question to start a conversation, when a team member comes into your office, just say to them, what's on your mind, Mohammed? What's on your mind, Faisal? Let them open up. And then, of course, I'm a huge fan of the TED questions. So the TED questions are: tell me, explain to me, describe to me. So Mohammed, tell me what's going on. Explain to me the current situation. Describe to me, the desired outcome. And then we start the conversation from that. So that ability to ask questions. So you've got that, the first 4, the second 4, and then we talk about the structure of a conversation. So then the third 4 in the sequence is really around then having a really good structure around the conversation. So when we're coaching, we're always going to be talking about taking the team member to the future.
Correct.
So that's it. What are we trying to achieve? What are you looking for? Why is that important to you? We're going to take them right into the future. Then the second part of the conversation, we're going to talk about what's currently happening. This is what we call the reality. So this is past and present. What's happened in the past? What's currently happening in the situation? Yeah, that gives us two really big gaps. obviously there's some space here between what's happening
Yes.
today, the reality, and what
Yes.
the individual would like to happen in the future, which is the goal. So they've got that
Yes.
gap. That gap is then explored with options. So basically, we're going to do a whole piece around, what could the coachee do? What could the employee do? This is the real empowerment phase, getting them to kind of solve their own problems. Because, I have two children. I don't give advice to people. I make it. I'm very consciously do not give advice to team members.
Which
Don't give advice.
is really interesting, Andrew, because most of the times I've felt that personally, that when you're coaching, it shouldn't be so that you're really advising. Is that correct?
That is 100. As a coach, I would never, ever, ever, ever offer advice. I executive coach and I executive mentor. If I'm executive mentoring, so when the CEO comes and says, Andrew, can you please mentor this individual on maybe on their impact or on how they present or how they look, then it's a much more direct conversation. So I will actually guide them. But I come from a position of authority and expertise. As an executive coach, I am master of the process, but I am not master of their problem. The person who has the best handle of their problem is actually the coachee, the employee.
That's
if you look
so
at
being a master of the process and not being the master of the problem.
absolutely,
Really
that's
interesting.
exactly, yeah. And if you look at I'm not sure whether you're familiar with Edward Demings and his work, and Edward W. Demings, and that look at that kind of space. Look at Elton Mayer, look at Hertzberg. I mean, these guys all talk really around empowering team members, and they do that. Their central idea is that the individual, the coachee, the employee, is the master of their problem. Actually, all we need to
So
do is ask them
would it
questions.
be right for me to put it like this, that having been coached by an executive coach, my performance, it's contextual. So my performance is not the direct outcome, rather it is mediated because of realization that I have been able to handle my problem, and that I've been able to structure the problem and have a better clarity to I don't know, maybe to solve my problem. Is that how I should put it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And let me tell you why. Let me give you the answer to that question. Because if I tell you to go and do something, yeah. So I say, so Ashma, go and do this. I think you should do this, yeah. So you might think, oh, not sure I want to. I don't really know I want to do that. But Andrew's like my boss, and Andrew's a very important man. Yada yada yada. The reality then is that when you go and do it, if it doesn't work out for you, who are you going to blame? Might have lost you. Who are we going to? Is the connection still working? But the reality is that if we give our employees too much direction, we tell them what to do. When it doesn't work out, generally what happens here is that we then find that the employer will blame us, and it's the same with my children. I really don't want to give advice to my children for the same reasons. I try not to give advice to my wife for the same reason, because if I give them advice, what then happens is that the team, my beautiful wife or my children basically will hold it against me. So much as it does frustrate them on occasion, I'm very keen to allow them to make the decision. Of course, I have a duty of care towards the employee or to my wife and my children, because I wouldn't want them to recklessly place themselves in danger. So if they give me a course of action, they tell me they're going to do something or they want to do something, it's really, really important that if I feel that they might be endangering themselves by taking that particular course of action, I'm actually able to have that conversation with them. We can talk it through before they actually go and commit to it. And 100% of the time, as we're discussing it, they kind of go, actually, doing that would be really, really, really silly. So they're the kind of the sort of the 4 points. You've got that. Probably the most difficult part of any coaching conversation is actually knowing when to use the coaching tool, because there are actually other tools available as leaders, and it's not just about coaching. We need to have what I call my telling tool, my directive tool. I need to have my coaching tool. I need to have my supporting tool, and I need to be able to delegate as well as a manager. So I've got my 4 basic tools that I'm using with my teams. But then, if I decide to use the coaching tool on a particular individual, it also depends very much on where that person is in their kind of in their development. So actually we've kind of lost you for a few minutes there, so I'm not sure. As long as we didn't lose everyone else, I'm not sure. But did everyone else kind of Ashma's back? Did everyone else hear that? Can I just confirm that everyone else heard those points that I was making, particularly around directive? Yes. Yeah, great. Okay, that's okay. Serena, thank you very much. That's really good. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's lovely. So guys, it's really hard because I was chatting to some brilliant engineers on Thursday, and they were saying, we want to help our people, but actually you're not really, by telling them what to do, you're not really helping your people. The only way you help your people is by encouraging them to solve their own problems, and that's where the challenge is. And it's the reason I mentioned a little bit earlier on the call, been doing a bit of work with NASA in Houston recently, and that's been fascinating for me. And the reason we kind of got involved in working with NASA isn't so much that it's because I was talking to the head of NASA. His name is Call Sign Atlas. I mean, he's like the #1 man at NASA. I mean, a clever man. I'm me. But he's very clever. And what was fascinating when I was talking to him was really that he was saying that, because I suppose in my head, when I was talking to him, and I suppose still in my head really, that there's an assumption that they attract the world's best. So if you're the world's best engineer, the best best scientists, best physicists, best mathematicians, best chemists, best I don't know, whatever. But they are generally the best pilots. These people are good, right? Because they work for NASA. Yeah. But being good as a scientist, being good as a mathematician, being good as a pilot, that's one thing. It doesn't make you a good leader. It doesn't make you a great leader. And that's another thing. So that's we need to teach you to be a good pilot, and teach you to be a good engineer, and teach you to be a good mathematician. Yes, but we also need to teach you to be a great leader. And they are different things. And it's and just because you are a great mathematician or a great pilot or a great engineer, it does not make you a great leader. So we're really in that kind of the business of helping people, and that for me, that helping comes from giving people the opportunity to solve their own problems. And it's not my work, it's Deming's. I mean, if you read Edward Deming's, I mean, that's I would definitely reference him. Some very, very interesting work there.
Yes, that's so right. That's so right. So a lot of human-related aspects being discussed by Andrew over here. I think perhaps for those who've been in sessions with us, with all our faculty members, similar keywords, being human, just being great at your work doesn't really make you a great leader. Does anybody have a question though? You all can just keep it coming in if you have anything in particular, if you'd like to ask Andrew. But Andrew, while the questions come in, how would you tell us something about Etihad and how is it being dealt at Etihad? The difficulties, because a lot of people, even we've had a couple of students who were from the airline industry, they've lost their jobs because of the COVID-19. So considering the current messy situation, people losing jobs, becoming emotional, not knowing where to go ahead, what would you have to say on that?
Well, I think for anyone who is for anyone who's unfortunately lost their job in any industry over the last 9 months because of the COVID disaster, I've got to be honest with you, there's always going to be I'll give you my 3 tips. I mean, that's I'm holding up. I'm trying to hold up 3 fingers and not there. I'm watching my screen there. But yeah, three things I think are really important. And I've got to be honest with you. If you're trying to find a job, it has to be a full-time job. So look, as in when you're applying for jobs, really, you have to work very hard. So there's you can't just randomly send in the same CV. I have many thousands of followers in LinkedIn, and every single day I get messages in LinkedIn saying, quote unquote, "Sir, give me job." Yeah, it isn't. That's not how the world works. I love these people to bits, and I'm very it's nice to hear from them, and I'm always quick to respond to them. But just saying, "Sir, give me job," it doesn't really work. So don't be that individual. I mean, bless you. I know you're having a hard time, but don't send me an email saying, "Sir, give me job," because that's not going to work. It's really bad. The second thing, and probably the most important thing, and it's the thing that I learned a long time ago in my career, is if you want to be successful in your career, understand what people need from you. So get an understanding. And that only comes from asking questions. So you have to understand what people need, and you can only do that if you ask them a lot of questions. And when they give you the answers, then you can match a solution against their need. And I've got to be honest with you, the last 5 jobs, and I've worked with some massive organisations around the world, and the last 5 jobs I've got come from pretty much that, where they approach me and they ask me for an idea or a view or perspective on what they're doing. And then I ask them some more questions around kind of what's currently happening and what they might need to do differently and where they think they're going as an organisation. And then I offer them a solution to that. And I've been very lucky because then they obviously then, they say, well, do you fancy that gig? Do you fancy that job? So that's really, really important for me. The third thing is, and we've touched it already a couple of times here, but it's about being flexible. It's about being uber agile. Gosh,
Yes.
you've got to be super, super, super agile in the process. We and I'll give you an example of that going back to Etihad Aviation Group, because before COVID, we really wanted to move to much more virtual platforms. We always had that idea. We always wanted to go micro learning.
Yes.
We operate in 74 countries around the world. We're obviously our hub is Abu Dhabi, but we're flying everywhere. So we have team members in Chicago, we have in Munich, in London, in Sydney, in Melbourne, and the list just goes on and on. So it's very difficult. And of course, in the past, traditionally, what we would have done, because we have an airline at the end of the day, it's expensive but not ridiculous. But we would have flown them into Abu Dhabi. Or the business would have flown me to New York, and it did. It would fly me to New York, or it would fly me to India, and I would do a presentation, and it was nice. I mean, I'm not complaining about that because it was fantastic.
Yes.
But the reality is that it was relatively limited, and the number of people you can actually see in a workshop is going to be quite small. I regularly run sessions now on virtual sessions for 2,500 people. 800 people, 1,000 people turn up for sessions. For any budding facilitators out there, I always have a very simple answer to anyone who asks me the question, how the heck do you get 2,000 people listening to you on a call, Andrew? The answer to that question is, you're only as good as your last presentation.
Absolutely. It has to be impactful. People are only going to come back to you if they really have a takeaway from your previous.
Yeah, and as I was saying, we polled our guys, 98.3% of people said they recommend us, and about 97% said they come back regularly. So you've got, and I'm always acutely aware that I'm only as good as my last event. That's really, really important. But when we went into COVID, it was a bit of a like, oh gosh, we had the technology which was being massively underutilized. We had been trying to move towards using sort of virtual technology, but unfortunately, the business was saying, I can't get my microphones to work, the hard drive doesn't work, the software doesn't work, yada, yada, yada. What we found actually within about 48 hours of COVID hitting was that everyone seemed to overcome the technology issues. So the vast majority of our teams were able to do it. I was obviously grounded, like all of our employees in Etihad. That was like many, many people around the world. We were grounded. We found ourselves working from home. I got to be honest with you, and I started working from home for the first time in my sort of
all of us.
First 40, for 40 years of my career, I'd never worked from home. It was my first ever time doing it, and I had to. At the beginning, I thought this is going to be a nightmare. I don't even know if I can do it. But I have to say that I'm obviously now back at the office. I work at the office again now. But the reality is, I actually did. I would have probably worked even harder working from home. If I'm honest, it was almost impossible. And I was doing 16 hours a day at the office.
And it was unbelievable for even us here at Westford. We found ourselves way more productive. We started looking at files and projects that were left behind, and they were always on our to-do list. We actually started scratching things off the to-do list, and we were able to. I think we were able to work better and more. And somehow the value of time just struck us, I believe.
Yeah, no, I would say it definitely worked for me. So so very, very quickly back to our MVP piece. I kind of thought, oh gosh, I suppose really it was initially from a position of self-preservation, really, because I kind of thought, I'm a facilitator. I probably need to be facilitating. I manage a big team of facilitators. I mean, a lot of facilitators. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I'm VP of Learning, so all my team are expert facilitators, and we train. That's what we do every day, day in, day out. So I was quick to kind of go, we need to do something really, really fast. And within about 48 hours, we published some virtual learning opportunities to our audiences. I have to be honest with you, I didn't really know where it was going. I went, here's some really good topics I could probably talk on, and we could probably do some presentations around that, and we could develop people around that. And we pushed out links. And actually, we were overwhelmed with the response, because then we were getting like 2,000 people dialing in. And at the beginning, it was like, oh gosh, that's just staggeringly amazing that 2,000, 2,500 people would want to listen to me. But they did, and that was great. And then very quickly, it kind of dawned on me that people probably wouldn't want to listen to me every single time there was a session. So could we actually bring in other people? And then my next kind of thought there was, okay, who do I know in my network, and I have quite a big network, who I can phone up and say, actually, would you mind helping me? And so, because I got Mark Gallen, I phoned him, I think he was with one of the first, and I phoned Mark and I said, Mark, could you help me? Julia Cook, I phoned Julia, Carrie Foster, some really good friends of mine. And I said, would you mind, me interviewing you? You talk about a topic, you choose the topic, and that really just has taken off for us. So this year, I said on this last Wednesday was our 33rd World Class Wednesday webinar event, and I said on that journey we've had NASA, we've had Lords from the House of Lords, we've had people like Julia Cook and Carrie Foster and Mark. We're talking like great authors, world class speakers. It hasn't cost me any money. I haven't got any money, and one of the reasons I'm speaking to you today is primarily because I don't get paid for this gig. But what is important to me is I'm able to help other people, because I know that other people have helped me.
Correct.
So when I speak to people, it's really about returning the favor. It's about returning the favor, and paying it forward. So absolutely. When people reach, that's kind of why we're speaking now. So I think just adopting and using the technology available to us is really, really important. Being very agile.
Absolutely. So that was about agility, being flexible, being open towards improving yourself, keeping in mind that you may be really good at what you're doing, but that's perhaps not what really makes you a great leader. Looking at being more empathetic, asking the right questions instead of guiding and supervising, looking at coaching that's going to help your team develop. The floor is open for questions. So I see a couple of you all who are here. Thank you for joining once again. If you have any question that you'd like to ask Mr. Andrew, here we are. He is giving away his word. We think we have the first question, so let's bring it on. It's from Fawad Khan. Fawad, thank you. Hi. Everything that makes sense and is quite practical. One question: how do you make people learn and develop themselves who are working at higher hierarchical level than you? A very interesting question there, Andrew, because I'll tell you what happens is now, Fawad has a very good question. He's trying to say that how can you be the one who can bring about the change and let people learn and listen to you who are in fact working at a superior position than you, at a higher level in the hierarchy? How do you get them to listen to you?
Okay, well, there's. I mean, I'll give you this in again. We could discuss this for days and days and days. So I'll try and keep it really, really short. But in reality, I'm back to my 4. I do it seems like a session of 4s today. So please forgive me for that. But you have to understand first of all how people communicate. That's fundamental for me. So there's 4 kind of ways that we communicate, and actually there's 4 levers to motivation in my head anyway. So I'm always massively focused on those 4 levers. There's 2 which one I believe just is completely doesn't work at all, and it's probably most people on this call and most organisations, it's their preferred mechanism, but it doesn't work, and I'll tell you why. And the mechanism is, you must do this or I am going to punish you. It doesn't work.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work, because punishment and just telling people they're going to do it. Look, I mean, anyone who drives a car, we all, I mean, including myself, we break the speed limit. We use our phones when we're driving. We don't wear seatbelts sometimes. There's plenty of laws. We know why we should do it, but we don't do it, right? Because we make a decision that we for some reason we just don't want to do it, and so we get punished. We get given fines for this behaviour. But does it really help us? No, it doesn't. Does it stop the behaviour? No, it doesn't. So making people do things and forcing them to do things, you might get a a tick in a box, and you might get 100% compliance. But the reality, does that information actually stick with the individual? I can tell you categorically it doesn't. So the first one is really telling people you must do this or I'm going to punish you. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. So try to park that one and move away from that. The second one, and probably the other one that doesn't really, it's difficult for you to influence, but it's probably the most important, is what I call I want to learn something. Now, that's a challenge, because if I can take the camel, I can take the horse to the watering hole, I cannot force the camel to drink. Yeah. The camel needs to decide it wants to drink itself. I can't make it drink. So what I can influence are two other levers. So we've got the lever that, the camel wants to drink the water, wants to learn. So the senior leader wants to learn. That's one lever, but that's a personal decision with that individual. It doesn't matter if it's a GSA or the CEO. Does she want to learn? Yes or no? That's her decision. We steer away from you must learn, and if you don't learn, I'm going to punish you for doing that because it doesn't really add value in my mind. I mean, I might get a compliance score, I might get an audit score, but in reality, it's not really working. But that leaves us with two things. The most impactful for me is I can. So helping people understand how they can learn, and making learning easily available for them, and making it, again, back to micro learning, making it very easy to find, making it fun, making it enjoyable. Then people kind of basically start to, they have a desire to want to learn, and then it's easy for them to take that journey with you. And that's backed up with my kind of fourth mechanism, which is really why we should. So we talk a lot about why they should be learning and what the benefits of learning are, and kind of what's in it for them if they learn. So in summary, number one, try to avoid telling them they have to, or you're going to punish them, because you might get a tick in a box, but it won't work. And trust me, this is like 40 years of experience telling me this. It's not just some random stuff. It's not some random English bloke talking to you about it. Telling people to do stuff and measuring them isn't really going to cut it at any level. It just doesn't work for me. What you really want, of course, is that team members want to do something. So that's the right employee in the right place at the right time, at the right stage of their career. That comes really from coaching, mentoring, project management, allowing them to actually do what they like doing. They really want to do it. And when they do decide they want to do it, you lay out a smorgasbord of learning, make it easy for them to learn, gamify it, make it fun, make it easily accessible, multiple devices, and then we reinforce it with I should learn, and we talk about the benefits of learning and how that works. And so there's a kind of measurement criteria behind what they are learning, and if they want to choose, for me, learners have to make a conscious decision to learn. And once they've made that conscious decision, I can support them. If they don't want to learn and it's their decision, as long as I can put my hand on my heart and say, we gave you every opportunity to learn and you decided you didn't want to do it, don't complain about not getting a promotion, about not getting a pay rise, not getting a bonus, not being successful in your career, because you're the ones you own it. So our system is called Own It. Our performance management system is called Own It. And that's really what it's about. It's about focusing on personal responsibility and accountability.
Very well said. So it's all about personal responsibility, accountability that you can take forward. I hope we've reached out to you with your question. We have a second question by Sanjana Matthews, and she, what should somebody keep in mind as fresh new graduates focus on when they're seeking for jobs post-COVID?
Oh, Sanja, I love you to bits. Ask a lot of questions, my friend. That'll be my answer to that question. Ask a lot of questions. So often not so much these days, but definitely in my career, I have people come into my office and they're so eager to tell me how brilliant they are and what experience they've got. And I haven't even had a conversation with them yet. And they don't, if you want to be successful in your career, it's the Andrew Stott experience, and please take it or leave it. It really, it's up to you how you take it. But ask your interviewer a lot of questions around what they're trying to achieve. What's the? I mean, it's weird. I mean, I don't give advice to both my kids, but both of my kids came straight out of university, went straight into work. I'll tell you why they did that, and I had no influence on what they were doing and why they were deciding to do it. we did have conversations, and they both got to the point where they understood that they would need to ask a lot of questions of the interviewer, because if they understood what the ideal candidate looked like, they understood what they were being asked to do, then it's easy for them to then match, because they asked those questions and they did a lot of research on what the job was, what was needed by the organisation. One works for a big bank, one works for a big legal firm, because they understood what those organisations needed. They were able to then, align their CVs, align their experience, and basically give them solutions, which then led to them getting offered jobs. And I don't doubt that. And as I said, last 6-7 jobs I've ever had in my career, so we're talking probably the last 20 years, those last 6 jobs all came from me really asking questions around the CEO or the chairman, or the head of whatever I was talking to, asking her what she needed from me, and then I was able to kind of match that. Hopefully that gives you an answer to that question. Are there any other questions you'd like to ask me, guys? Sanjana, does that help you a little bit? It's a great question, Sanjana. Okay. That's great, Sanjana. Thank you very much for your feedback. Like I said, if you want some more help with this, Sanjana, or anyone else, just ping me a message in LinkedIn. I'm absolutely easy to find. Just send me a message and we can connect and we can have some further conversations. I can send you some great resource as well. If you'd like me to send you some books or some learning or some information on anything we're discussing today, the coaching stuff or anything we're talking about, just reach out to me. I'm very happy to talk to you. Just find me on LinkedIn and just send me a message. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask me? I'm just kind of cool. How long can we suppose to do aviation? I would say probably. It's a great question, Serena. Beautiful question. I don't know is the answer. Unfortunately, I have no crystal ball like everyone else in the world, but I am a consumer, and I kind of believe that probably by about March, April, we will see a massive surge in demand for aviation, because there's a lot of pent-up need at the moment. I live in Abu Dhabi. Obviously my home is the UK. I haven't been to the UK for more than a year now. Missed my family. It would be nice to go back home. So the reality is, and I'm not unique, I suspect there are millions of people like me all over the world who would like to go back to India or the UK or Australia or New Zealand, and the list goes on. So actually, I think we're going to get busy. So I think probably watch this space, but March, April, May 2021, I think 2021 is going to be an incredible year. I actually think we're going to be the world's going to be is going to see growth that it's never seen before. I really do. And I think there's actually, I mentioned at the beginning, don't waste a good crisis. I genuinely think that there's going to be a huge surge in demand for aviation. Is this a good time to look for opportunities to organize? I would, you know what? I think it depends where you are. I think because if Jane, if you live in UAE, a lot of people have been sort of leaving the UAE recently, and I think there's a huge opportunity. It's much better if you're in Kuwait. Yeah, I think it's the same situation if you're in Kuwait. I lived in Jabriya in Kuwait. My children went to New English School. Nez in Jabriya, so you probably know it quite well. So if you, so I would say probably I would hold fire, stay where you are. I think as the market returns, as business returns, there's going to be a huge demand. So if you are, I'm not sure what your nationality is, but I think trying to stay in the market is useful. You're much more attractive if you're local. If they're having to bring you back from India or the UK or Australia, it's an added level of complexity. If they can just bring you straight back in because you're already a resident in Kuwait or in the UAE, then I would say, hang in there. Yeah. I think you're on mute.
Am I audible?
Go on, ask me the question again.
Okay, but can you hear me, Andrew?
I can now. Yeah, you are back in the room.
Yes. Okay, so the question that we've been having, it was in the other question and answer section. It says, so tell me about a time when you didn't follow a policy. you had to deviate from the policy, and how do you deal with an unethical situation? Any examples, perhaps?
Oh gosh, hundreds. Okay, let me try and put it into context. As with most things I do, I suppose I'm an operator. I'm an operator first, and then I'm a HR professional first. So the first, from sort of like 16 to 30 or 16 to 28, I worked in hotels and restaurants and ran very big hotels and restaurants. That was the beginning of my career, and then I sort of moved into more of a kind of HR role in my kind of late 20s, early 30s. That's kind of when I started really doing that. And I suppose there's always going to be three things that I'm very mindful of when I talk about sort of like policy and procedure. So generally speaking, there's kind of three things that you need to be very mindful of. First one is never, ever, 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 ever underestimate the policy and have a really good idea of what the policy is saying. It's always going to be much easier for you to ask, please I'm reluctant to offer loads of advice on this, but always asking for forgiveness as opposed to asking for advice or asking for permission. I would strongly encourage you to ask for forgiveness rather than asking permission, because once you ask permission, often perhaps slightly small-minded people will stop you from doing things. So it's much easier. I mean, for example, in one organisation a few years ago, I wanted to use cartoons and animations to get messages across. I knew that the organisation didn't want to do that and was very against that, but actually I still thought it was the right thing to do, and I sort of like deliberately pushed ahead and did it. Of course, it was wildly successful, and I still got a bit of a slap, but because I had the relationship, and actually once we'd done it the first time, they then adopted the idea they were going to use cartoons and they were going to use animation in their communications with the teams. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of employees. So I think that's really important. So the first thing is just be very mindful of what the policy says. We talk a lot, I suppose, around consistent application, really. So I think you need to be consistent in your approach to the way you do things. Like with most things, it's about building relationships, and those relationships, the culture of the organisation, everything what you're working on. Culture is built out of the sediment of experience. So culture is built from the sediment of experience. So we'll have a conversation now. So and you will take something away from that. Hopefully, you'll take something positive away from that about Andrew Stott. And then you'll have that kind of feeling that actually Andrew was quite, it was an interesting chap to listen to. Yeah, but those relationships, that culture is built up one experience at a time. The more that you have those conversations, then the stronger the culture becomes, and the more you're allowed to be more challenging within the organisation. So I think that's really important as well. And then I think the final thing I would say here is about reasonable application. So if you think it through. Sometimes you're doing things and you think, "Oh, that's just not the right thing." The business wouldn't want me to do that. I have my little friend who sits on my shoulder, and I think should we be doing this, or should we be doing something different? Let's be very let's be quite creative, and trust yourself. I think that's a really important point. We've got to be processes there for a reason. It can also stop you, and it can stop your career. So just be kind of mindful of that. We want to be a bit more challenging, a bit more creative, a bit more coaching, a bit more encouraging of other people. Do those things that make it a lot easier. So yeah, always look out for the policy. Definitely ask for forgiveness rather than asking permission is my top tip here, really. Be consistent in who you are. That makes it a lot easier. And then just act reasonably. Think about kind of what's the right decision to make, because sometimes it will make a huge difference. But I said if you've asked for permission and then someone says to you, no, you can't do that, and then you go and do it, now you're in real danger. My strong recommendation is don't be too quick to seek permission. Have a go at doing something, and and start small and adapt. Don't spend too much time making it perfect, because in most cases making it perfect is not going to really work for you. Get it out into the market. just reading. I'm reading Reynolds' question as well there.
Yes.
Anything else? Does that kind of hope that answers your question?
It did in a way, actually. We're looking at, how companies are actually taking advantage of the COVID-19. But it's not always going to be about the compensation reduction. I think they have no.
I mean, gosh, if it's, I mean, are we talking about salaries now? If you want to talk about salaries, I got some very strong views on salaries. So, yeah, I mean, guys, salary. If you look at Hertzberg's work and you look at the motivation factors, I mean, let's be honest, salaries and remuneration doesn't really cut it. You might get a slight. I mean, literally the last 4 organisations, and Etihad is included as well. In that, when I joined the organisation, I've had senior leaders telling me, if we just paid our team members an extra 10,000 dirhams a month or an extra 5,000 dirhams a month, everyone would be happy, all our problems would go away, our customer service would be fantastic. And I can tell you categorically, it is rubbish.
It is.
Because if you give people a big pay rise, they probably will love you for 5 minutes, and then they'll basically, because what happens is they will go and spend that money and they'll move to the next level in their lives. It's not going to solve your problems. Motivation comes from clarity of purpose. What am I being asked to do? Yeah. Am I being given regular feedback around how I'm doing? Yeah. Do I feel that I'm adding value to the organisation? So I do actually understand how my specific role impacts the wider organisation, and do I feel that I'm growing within the organisation? That's where motivation comes from. If you do those 4 things well as a leader, with your teams, then you will have a highly motivated team. I have lost count. It's a daily phone call I get in Etihad. I get a phone call every single day saying, Andrew, can you please come and motivate my team? And I answer them, I say, well, I'm very, very flattered that you think I can. But the reality is that I can come along and they probably will be motivated after listening to me for 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, that's fine. But when I leave again, they're not going to be motivated, because motivation doesn't come from me. It comes from clarity of purpose. It comes from you giving them feedback on how they're performing. It comes from them understanding the role they play within your team, and it comes from them growing and developing. That's where motivation comes from. It doesn't come from Andrew Stott.
Absolutely. I do believe the same. It's so important to just tell your team members that, they are valuable and that they are doing their job. Perhaps, just by communication, telling them that, I think you've just puddled a little here and there, you can improve. Yeah. Conversation has been going really well. I think I'm just going to take one last question, and that was, can you recommend a few books?
Oh gosh, hundreds of books I can recommend. Okay, let's start with the best. Probably, if you want the one single book that's the best book ever, for me, is The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. Yeah, so Ken Blanchard. Yeah, 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. That would be my kind of top tip. 138 pages. It's brilliant. There's obviously the pre-book to that. So the first book in the series is The 1 Minute Manager. So it's sometimes good to read that. Again, there's a very, very good Harvard Business Review on both books, which is a very good summary of The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey and The 1 Minute Manager. If you want those 3 books, I'll happily share those with you. Just send me a message in LinkedIn, and I will I'll share the books with you. No problem at all. It'll be my gift to you. So that's a really good starting point. Then I suppose if we want to kind of move beyond that, then I suppose my next favourite books would be probably Who Moved My Cheese. I love that book.
Oh yes, that's a classic. Has to be in your shelf.
Yeah, I mean, Who Moved My Cheese is fantastic. And then probably if we went after Who Moved My Cheese, I'd probably then go for something like Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Really fantastic book. Yeah, and then anything really, Malcolm Gladwell. I would strongly recommend anything about Daniel Pink, EQ. I mean, the Daniel Pink is brilliant. Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. Awesome book. David and Goliath, awesome book. They're really depends on where you want to go with your reading.
Where you want to go. I think you can start with Who Moved My Cheese. It's interesting, it's simple, and yet every time you read it, you've got a better understanding of it.
Yeah, no, it's a fair. I mean, I'm definitely if you're familiar with the book, I'm definitely in the sniff and scurry category. So I'm always looking for alternatives, and I think there's in that book there's 4 characters, and 2 of the characters are little mice running in a maze, and 2 of the characters are like little humanoids called Hugh and Haw. Don't be hue and haw because they die. I've given too much away probably, but try to be the sniff and scurry. You know, eat what you can, but then look for alternatives. Always looking for the next opportunity. And sniffing and scurrying around your career will make you a much more effective. Don't get stuck in a rut.
You're right.
Like you and Horde. Yeah.
So I'm going to encourage everybody to please look up for Mr. Andrew on LinkedIn, connect with him, follow him. His ongoing talks and the webinars perhaps that he's been also taking. You can attend them. You can know more about what's happening. Being self-motivated, I think that also would help Ajit, because Ajit has also said that he's staying here. He's alone. He has some experience, and he's been trying to cope with the COVID-19 situation and the chaos. And we all are, Ajit. I think motivation, as Mr. Andrew said, that it comes from within and looking for a purpose. So I think that all that you can do is look and be better, develop yourself. Don't give up hopes. Go ahead, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in. I think it's going to be really nice if we can connect with Mr. Andrew.
Ajit, ping me a message in LinkedIn, my friend, and we can have a conversation. I'm always open to a bit of to a chat. So yeah, ping me a message and we can connect. Like I said, anyone who wants to talk to me, just let me know. I mean, I am quite a busy chap, but I promise you, you'll get a response from me within a couple of minutes. So
yes.
Yeah.
What more do we want? I think thank you so much, Andrew, for coming in. And it was really nice. We're just having a general, casual chat. Reality. COVID hasn't really been easy on everybody, but I'm sure going forward, we'll connect with you on LinkedIn and with the others as well. Please do go ahead, like our page on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and these webinars are not just yet done. We have a couple of more lined up for all of you, so you can join in again and have another chat with us. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to wish you all the very best. I hope that you keep doing the best that you are. I'm sure all of us over here are very happy. I am very happy. I'm going to be taking a lot. So that word that you said, that you're just as good as your previous, I'm sure we're going to have you once again back. Thank you.
Always happy to come and chat. Always happy to come and chat. Yeah.
Yes.
Take care. Thanks for listening to me.
Have a wonderful time and wish you a Merry Christmas in advance. Happy New Year as well.
Likewise. Love to all. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. This was yet another webinar session. We connect Westford University College. Stay tuned because we're going to be having many more webinars that are going to come in. Go ahead, like our Facebook page. Don't forget to like our Instagram. We're very active. All our posts are there for you to keep track of. So see you until then for another webinar. Thank you and have a very nice day ahead. Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.